I remember smelling that leather, not the expensive Florentine leather of my new briefcase, but the old, stuffy, sweat and fear-soaked leather of the chair in the interrogation room I was taken to immediately after the security guard at the entrance to my own skyscraper, seemingly leisurely but absolutely irrevocably, took my cell phone. It was that moment of absolute, surreal silence, when you are surrounded by billions of dollars of investment, your logo on every other billboard in the city, and you were sitting in a hard, wooden chair, and the only thing that matters is the look of the federal agent across from you, who calmly, almost boredly, announced, "Mr. Koval, we have found what you have been hiding from the world for 12 years. Your success is first someone else's failure, and then our interest." My heart, a perfectly tuned clock that had for years counted only pure profits and perfect decisions, suddenly began to skip beats like a broken mechanical toy. I looked at the glass table, on which lay a single, yellowed photograph, not the cover of Forbes, where I had laughed at the age of 35, but my hand, very young, the hand of a 20-year-old student, clutching the edge of the paper that was our joint agreement, the agreement that I had burned in the fireplace of my first penthouse so that not a single spark of doubt would seep into my new, shiny world. Also in the photograph was Alexander, my then partner, who had died in an accident a week after signing this agreement that, as it turned out, secured him 50% of the future of the Intellectum Group, a company worth $300 billion today. It was not just evidence of fraud, it was a phantom pang of conscience materializing in the hands of the FBI. "This paper, Mr. Koval, did not burn," the agent said, lightly touching the photo. "Mr. Sayenko, your former secretary who was fired 3 years ago, turned out to be more sentimental about old office photos than you thought. He remembered where you signed it, and where the copy you didn't take with you that night was. We're not talking about money, Mr. Koval, we're talking about the moral weight of your empire." I felt a cold wave of understanding sweep through me. It wasn't that they had found the copy, but that someone from my past, whose name I could barely remember, whose face was only a hazy memory of one of 1,000 transactions, had decided that its price was the price of my absolute demise. My perfect, brilliant life, built on a single, masterfully concealed lie, began to burst at the seams, and the only sound I heard was the quiet, even voice of the agent, waiting for my first, desperate lie. My return to the penthouse was more like entering a mausoleum than a home. Every marble pattern, every perfectly placed piece of art, seemed to mock the fragility of my situation, and the gaze of my wife, Anna, was heavier than the steel doors of a vault. She didn't demand an explanation right away, her silence was more devastating than any scream or rebuke, and it was in it that I felt the real loss, not of money but of the trust of someone who thought he knew me. I tried to call my lead lawyer, Lipsky, but his number kept ringing short, and an hour later he texted, "We can't afford to risk the reputation of the firm. I'm sorry. This is the end of our relationship." In that moment, I realized that the ice had cracked not just beneath my feet but beneath the entire island on which I had built my life. The next morning, the media sharks I had kept on a short leash for years with generous advertising budgets and exclusive interviews were upon me with unprecedented fury. The headlines screamed bloodstained funds, empire of lies, billionaire betrayed friend for fortune, and the television pundits gleefully discussed my every charitable contribution as a cynical attempt to whitewash stolen millions. I felt naked under the microscope of the world, and every defensive maneuver, every press release, every attempt to justify myself only made matters worse, fueling the general hatred for the man who, in their opinion, had everything and still decided to steal. My crisis fighters, reputation consultants, advisors disappeared like shadows at dawn, leaving me alone with this unstoppable wave. The most painful blow came when I got a call from the son of Alexander, the very partner I had framed. "My father, Koval, was there an accident? Did you take him away to complete the deal?" The voice of the young man I had last seen when he was a child trembled with such anger that I could barely hold the phone. I tried to justify myself by saying that the death was a tragic accident, that the deal was only a matter of time, but he cut me off, his words like nails in the lid of my reputation. "Your lawyer offered my mother a significant amount of compensation, just to keep her quiet. She refused. Do you think we are stupid? We know you were just buying your time. Now I don't want money. I want you to lose everything, like we lost." In that moment I realized, I had lost not only my fortune, I had lost the right to a clean name, and even my billions could not atone for that crime of 12 years ago. I was left alone, surrounded by glass and gold, but I felt poorer than any vagrant. After my world had become an arena for public crucifixion, I found myself in the solitude that only a billionaire, disowned by everyone, could afford, in an old country villa where journalists had not yet reached, surrounded only by guards and the ghosts of my past. I sat in the library for days, not reading, but staring at the blank screen of my switched-off laptop, pondering where I had made a fatal mistake. Just when I had almost come to terms with the inevitable loss, my guard, silent as a rock, brought me an envelope, an old, brown one, with no return address, and the only thing written on it in my old, almost forgotten handwriting: "If everything goes wrong, open this." It was my voice from the past, my paranoia that I had forgotten, that I, young and scared, had kept as my only insurance. Inside the envelope was not cash or compromising material, but a tiny flash drive wrapped in electrical tape, and a note written by Sayenko, the same former secretary who had sold my past to the FBI. "I am not a traitor, Mr. Koval. I only demanded justice. Alexander knew that sooner or later you would break the deal, and he made his own, very smart move. He trusted neither you nor his lawyer." With trembling hands, I inserted the flash drive into the computer, and there were no $1,000,000 bills or secret documents, only a single encrypted file called "The Real Deal." I spent a day cracking it, and when the last characters of the code came together, I saw not the expected copy of the deal that I had burned, but something much worse, and at the same time, saving. It was Alexander's legally impeccable will, dated 2 days before his death, detailing that in the event of his sudden death, his 50% share should be transferred not to his family, but to an anonymous charitable foundation, with the sole requirement that the foundation invest the money exclusively in developing technologies that Alexander would consider ethical and serving humanity during his lifetime. And there was also a stipulation: if I ever try to hide the existence of this foundation or use its assets for my own benefit, the legal successor to all its assets, including my 50% share, becomes Sayenko, the same secretary. I felt Alexander's cold logic, his deep distrust of my greed, pierce through me. He didn't just leave me his half, he made me its eternal custodian, tying my fate to his moral code. This was not forbidden knowledge, it was a forbidden duty that completely turned the picture of the world upside down. I am not just a thief, I am the key to realizing someone else's ethical dream, and Sayenko is not a traitor, but a tool in the hands of a dead man. Armed with this will, which was both my sentence and my lifeline, I faced a choice that had no parallel in my business career. I could use this document to prove that half of my empire belonged to the foundation, not me personally, and that I had misused it, thereby admitting fraud but saving my company's reputation from total collapse and myself from prison under the most serious articles. Or I could try to continue denying everything, risking losing both the company and my freedom and the last remnant of human dignity. I decided to go all in. I invited my son Alexander, who had led the media attack on me, to meet me in a half-abandoned park where we had once played chess in our student days, away from cameras and prying ears. He came, looking at me with undisguised, burning contempt, and his first words were as sharp as glass: "You think you can buy my silence? You can shove your millions where the sun rises, Koval." I didn't answer, but silently handed him the flash drive with my father's will. His face, as he read the document, went through all the stages, from rage to amazement, and finally to a bitter, almost painful respect for his dead father's foresight. He knew you couldn't be honest. He made you his debtor to the world," he whispered, and I saw his desire for revenge give way to a deep, moral conflict. "Now you understand," I said, my voice heavy with realization. "If I accept this deal, I accept that 50% of Intellectum Group has always belonged to this fund. I lose half my fortune, and it will be a legal, public disaster. But if I do this, your media campaign must stop. You must confirm that I did not conceal the fraud, but was simply negligent in carrying out my father's will, and now I am correcting the mistake. I am risking everything for the purity of his name and his dream. Either we destroy his legacy together, or we save it together, even if it costs me my empire." It was a moment not of strength but of desperation, and I knew that his decision would determine not only my fate but the true weight of my redemption. Alexander's son, Nikolai, looked at me for a long time, his eyes a reflection of my own youth, greedy, ambitious, but now wounded. He didn't answer right away, he simply put the flash drive back in the envelope and said just one word that weighed more than all the billions: "Okay." This unwritten agreement to end the war became the single, most important document of my life. I held a public press conference not in my luxurious office, but in the lobby of the university where Alexander and I had once dreamed of our first millions. I stood before the cameras, feeling the weight of every word, and for the first time in 12 years I wasn't playing a role, but speaking the truth, albeit with careful legal caution. I made a mistake, I said, looking straight into the spotlights. I hid the will of my partner, Alexander, out of my own greed and fear. Part of his legacy, 50% of Intellectum Group, should have always belonged to the ethical foundation he founded. Today I publicly acknowledge this. I am not only returning these assets, but I will personally lead the management of this foundation to realize his vision, investing in technologies that Alexander considered important for the future of humanity. I do not apologize to the media or the government. I apologize to his memory. The headlines the next day were predictably harsh: billionaire admits fraud, empire lost half. But for the first time, a thin thread of respect appeared amidst this filth. Koval's redemption? I had lost control of half my empire, but I had found another kind of control over my life. My wife, Anna, came back, but not because of the money, but because for the first time she saw in me a man, not just a financial monster. Nikola, Alexander's son, became my advisor at the fund, his sharp, uncompromising morality a necessary counterbalance to my old cynicism. I remained rich, very rich, but my fortune was no longer my main goal. Now I woke up every morning to fulfill the will of a dead friend, and not just to line my own pockets. I often wonder, is it possible to be rich and honest? My answer, being rich, guided only by greed, is easy. But staying rich, when you consciously bear responsibility not only for your assets, but also for other people's moral principles, is a real test that cost me half my fortune, but gave me my whole life. And now, when I make a decision, I always ask myself, is this what Alexander would have done? This message that he left me is more precious than any stars.